Let me know if you're anything like me. You spend all your months leading up to summer planning how you will use all your newly found free time, the books you're going to read, the time you're going to spend with friends, the trips you're going to take, the content you'll make, the creative project that you're finally going to get off the ground. But then when summer actually rolls around and you have all that nice free time, you find yourself in bed, binging YouTube or scrolling on TikTok with the AC blasting and Lana Del Rey's Summertime Sadness playing. Instead of the writing you're gonna do or the content you're supposed to make or the plans you had with friends, you are bedrotting. If you're new here, hi, welcome to my internet bedroom. And if you are returning, welcome back to my internet bedroom. I'm Rachel Moss. I'm a full-time writer, internet cultural critic, and now YouTuber. Since 2022, bedrotting has become a meme. It's become a personal practice that allows us to escape a world that is always demanding more and more and more from us. It's even become a set of aesthetics for girls online. But what are we really doing when we decide to rot? Are we taking care of ourselves in a world that is constantly demanding more outcome? Or are we surrendering our attention to our phones and the systems that demand that constant output and attention from us in the first place? So bedrotting has been trending for a while now, but it is actually not all that new. In 1998, the artist Tracey Emin installed her bed in the Tate Gallery in London in a piece called My Bed, comprised of her actual bed along with all the debris of a week-long period where she laid in bed, too depressed to move after a breakup. My bed contains everything from crumpled cigarette cartons to worn clothing, used tissues and pregnancy tests, empty bottles, and Polaroids the artist took of herself while she lay in bed. But she recalls that when she finally did get out of her depressive episode, she looked back at what she had created in those days laying in bed, and she saw something sculptural, beautiful even. She said, quote, "Once I had transported that deathbed and took it somewhere else, in my head, it became something incredibly beautiful." At the time, Emin was known for her self-portraits in both paintings and photographs, but she really viewed her installation, My Bed, as even more intimate than any of those previous self-documentations she had presented. She felt that My Bed gave her viewers even more intimate access to her life, even though she was no longer in the bed. And despite the uproar that Emin caused both in the art world and in tabloids by installing her bed in an art gallery and claiming that it was art, My Bed frames the bed and one woman's act of bedrotting as a site of chaos, creativity, and deep vulnerability and authenticity. So again, I'm really curious today, what is it that we are actually doing when we're bedrotting? Is it self-care, just in different words? Is it a genuine desire to reconnect with ourselves and check out from the world for a little while? Is our bed still the place where we kind of perform the most intimate acts of our lives that the public doesn't always have access to? Or has it become something different under a state in which we can always upload ourselves to the internet and be seen, even in our most private spaces? So, bedrotting is the act of choosing to stay in bed for extended periods of time, only leaving for basic needs like food or to go to the bathroom. According to Saudhab O'Sullivan for Refinery29, the term emerged sometime in 2022, quickly amassing hundreds of thousands of posts under the hashtag bedrotting. Bedrotting, this willful checking out and disconnection from the world, as O'Sullivan points out, is a grosser, edgier version of the self-care rhetoric we've seen proliferate across social media, ad campaigns, and in mental health spaces since the 2010s. The trend, she writes, uses deliberately off-putting language to invoke a sense of grossness, pushing back against the more sanitized, culturally acceptable rhetoric we see in self-care circles. Of course, bedrotting is actually nothing new. Women and femmes have long been affiliated in our cultural imagination with domestic spaces, in particular the bedroom. And when I first encountered the concept of bedrotting, I couldn't help but think of Charlotte Perkins Gilman's short story, The Yellow Wallpaper. Published in 1892, Gilman's short story is told from the perspective of a young woman whose husband is a physician and puts her or prescribes her the rest cure to treat her, quote, temporary nervous depression. As the time that she is confined to her bedroom grows longer, she finds herself more and more out of touch with reality, becoming fixated on the wallpaper in her room and of the story's title, and thinking that she can actually see another woman on the other side of the wall living in the wallpaper. Now, the story was inspired by Gilman's own experience when her husband and doctor prescribed her the rest cure, which was a not uncommon 19th century treatment for symptoms of mysterious ailments that often affected women, like hysteria or depression. When Gilman was placed under the rest cure, her doctor instructed her to live as domestic a life as possible, have but 2 hours of intellectual life a day, and never touch pen, brush, or pencil as long as you live. And even though Gilman tried to follow her doctor's instructions, she found that the more she was confined to her bed, the more she was not allowed to do creative acts. Much like the main character in her story, she found herself losing touch with reality. And Gilman would eventually go on to divorce her husband and just become a writer, so we can kind of see how her story played out. And while most bedrotters today are not confined to their bedrooms against their will, there is a sense that they've retreated from public spaces and public life because the conditions of the modern world have forced them to check out. The Yellow Wallpaper was published at the end of the Industrial Revolution, a period where we saw the widespread advancement of machine-driven manufacturing and labor, and where a lot of people went from living in smaller, more agrarian communities to larger urban centers. Middle-class women who were not necessarily laborers themselves still struggled to adapt to the conditions of this newly mechanized world and were often diagnosed with more mysterious ailments like hysteria and prescribed bed rest. And I can't help but see a parallel between these women who were prescribed bed rest and forced to lay in bed for days and months on end, and the way that we are retreating back into our own beds at a time where we're dealing with multiple crises, global, economic, climate crises, as well as sweeping technological changes such as the rise of AI and the surveillance culture that big tech has proliferated. I'm certainly not the first to recognize that we live in exhausting times, and that a little break from the news cycle or showing up to online spaces that constantly demand our presence sounds nice. We live in a moment where even our free time feels like it is claimed by the idea that we could be doing something, participating in the marketplace in some way that assures our future success. And content creation is actually a great example of this because it comes with this idea that I can get paid to just be myself. If only I trade all of my free time for scripting videos, editing them, uploading them, and then maintaining and building a community online on social platforms that will allegedly reward me for all of my efforts and the hours that I've spent putting together content for my audience. And plenty of creators and creatives online, myself included, have pointed out that this demand that we constantly be making content and putting content out onto the internet is an energetic race to the bottom. But if we want eyes on our work and if we want to build an audience, what choice do we have? As Gia Tolentino notes in her 2019 essay, Always Be Optimizing, a lot of our habits, routines, and rituals that used to be about caring for ourselves, from skincare to bar class, have actually become exhausting performances that we now do in public in order to reach an ideal self that will help net us money, time, online attention, if only we work at it hard enough. The worse things get, she writes, the more a person is compelled to optimize. When self-care itself becomes just another type of effort, I can see the appeal in wanting to stay in bed all day surrounded by Taco Bell wrappers and mindlessly scrolling on your phone. Bedrotting itself starts to look a little bit like rebellion. Now, in our world that demands constant output, it is expected that we are going to, at some point, burn out. And when we do that, we engage in self-care activities in order to revitalize ourselves and get back to work. This idea that burnout is always going to be a constant part of our lives in the 21st century has inspired many artists, activists, and writers to suggest that rest is radical and rest is resisting the very demands that we always show up, always be optimizing, and always be ready to perform. Tricia Hersey, founder of the Nat Ministry, even wrote a book on this topic, aptly titled Rest is Resistance. Bedrotting seems like a radical act of rejection of a system that demands our time, our attention, and our labor. But is it really? I'm going to tell you a little secret, so, gather close. Even though I have my PhD in English, I did not read Ottessa Moshfegh's 2018, by now cult classic novel, My Year of Rest and Relaxation, until last year. And the reason for this is actually very fitting to today's topic because I actually didn't read much of anything while I was getting my PhD because I was deeply depressed and laying in bed most of the time. But now that I have medication, I can read again. So shouts out to Prozac, and thank you, Prozac, for sponsoring this video. Wouldn't that be hilarious if Eli Lilly or Fluoxetine this is my sponsor? That would be amazing. Moshfegh's novel, My Year of Rest and Relaxation, follows a depressed, unnamed female narrator who takes opiates and has the dream of sleeping for an entire year, which honestly relatable. Readers online have a really hard time agreeing over whether or not this novel is satirizing the privilege of its white middle class or upper middle class protagonist who wants to sleep for a year and is generally kind of a not great person to her friends and the people that she knows and even service industry workers. But most readers can agree that the narrator is somewhat annoying and difficult to like, even if her desire to sleep for an entire year is deeply relatable. But regardless of your interpretation of the book and whether or not it is satire, one of the really interesting features of Moshfegh's novel is the extent to which sleep actually evades our protagonist who just wants to check out from the world and go to bed. At a certain point, she finds that all the treatments that have been prescribed to her in order to help her sleep are actually doing quite the opposite.
11:10 p.m. Can't sleep. 11:30, wide awake. 11:45, still awake. When you sometimes take too long to fall asleep at night, take Sominex as directed for 100% safe sleep.
In one passage, she describes, "Night was falling. I felt tired, heavy, but not exactly sleepy. So I took another Nambutal, watched Presumed Innocence, and then took a few Lunestas and drank the second bottle of funeral wine. But somehow the alcohol undid the sleeping pills, and I felt even more awake than before. Then I had to vomit, and did so. I had drunk too much. I lay back down on the sofa. Then I was hungry, so I ate the banana bread and watched Frantic 3 times in a row, taking a few Atvian every 30 minutes or so. But I still couldn't sleep. I watched Schindler's List, which I hoped would depress me, but it only irritated me, and then the sun came up. So I took some Lamictal and watched The Last of the Mohicans and Patriot Games, but that had no effect either, so I took a few Placidil and put the player back in. When it was over, I checked the digital clock on the VCR. It was noon. So instead of successfully fully checking out from her life and escaping into sleep, what this narrator actually does looks a lot like what we do when we are actually bedrotting. So we're checked out, but we're still on our phone, still present in the system of capital and the marketplace of attention. At the end of April, one of my favorite artists, Qualisha Wood, really drove this point home for me when she performed the act of bedrotting for 2 hours at the opening of her solo exhibition in London. Of her performance titled Attention Economy, Qualisha wrote, "I became the user, the subject, and the product. I bedrot often, and sometimes we bedrot not out of laziness, but as a kind of quiet protest." Still, she recognizes that the suspended state of attention that bedrotting places us in is an ambivalent space that only offers us the illusion of control. When we disappear into ourselves, into our feeds, what happens to reality, to the body, she wonders. And what does it mean to be present when presence is always somewhere else? So what do you guys think? Is bedrotting a silent protest? Is it a meaningless performance? Is it just another way that we plug back into the system that is always demanding our attention and our ideal selves? Let me know in the comments. I'm really interested to hear from you all. And thank you guys so much for the support that you've shown on my video about how to be on Substack as a creative. I am blown away by how much traction that video has gained and how many new subscribers are here with us. So, and like what's even more important to me is honestly all of the comments and messages you guys have been sending to me. I'm trying to reply to as many of them as I can because I truly love talking to you all. I'm just so grateful that video resonated with you and even inspired you. And I really hope that I can keep making more videos like that, that are, helping you on your writing and your creative journey while I make these videos that are a little bit more creative themselves. So please subscribe if you like this mix of content. I know I'm doing a lot over here, but I don't feel like I want to be contained into just one box. I'm not going to make hundreds of videos about just Substack. But I will make more, I promise. I have a lot to say. I just can't believe that we have over 500 subscribers now to Internet Bedroom TV. And I am so grateful that you guys are here and willing to join me on this journey. So thank you. And if you liked essays like this one, you can find me over on Substack, which my Substack is also called Internet Bedroom. Last week, I released an essay called I Want My Lafufu that is about fake Labubus and generative AI and living in a world with generative AI as a creative. So if you liked this video, go check out that essay. It's up for free on my Substack. And if you're a paid subscriber over on my Substack, next week you will get my digital zine of everything that I loved for the month. So now is a great time to upgrade or become a paid subscriber. You can also grab my essay collection called The Internet is Our Bedroom, which has even more essays, much like this one, where I think about internet phenomenon, being a girl online, what the heck all that means. And there is one essay in there about my journey with Prozac. So if you're not tired of hearing a white girl talk about Prozac yet, you can go check that out as well. My book is currently for sale up on my website and is on sale for only $10. So you can go grab it right now. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. And I will see you next time here in Internet Bedroom.